Ruth was a 65-year-old widow who lived in a quiet, modest house on the edge of town. The home was always clean, filled with the scent of lemon polish and something warm baking in the oven. Ruth didn't have much in terms of material wealth, but she had an abundance of love. And all of that love, every last bit of it, belonged to her only child, Daniel. Ever since her husband passed away when Daniel was just 5 years old, Ruth had become both mother and father. She worked day and night, sometimes taking on 3 jobs just to make ends meet. She cleaned offices before the sun rose, worked long hours as a cashier in the local grocery store, and mended clothes for neighbors on weekends. Her hands told the story of her life, rough, lined with scars, and always busy. Each wrinkle on Ruth's face spoke of sacrifice. The faint scar near her left eye reminded her of a night filled with smoke and screams, a night she would never forget. She had pulled her son out of a burning apartment, shielding him with her body, earning that scar in the process. But Ruth never complained. Every ache, every sleepless night, every blister on her feet, she bore it all for Daniel. He was her sun, her moon, and everything in between. She made sure he wore clean clothes, had good books, and even better shoes. When he wanted to join the school's basketball team, she worked extra shifts to buy him the best sneakers. When he was accepted into a university, she took out a loan. She told herself she'd repay every cent just to see her son succeed. And succeed he did. Daniel grew into a confident young man with a good job in the city. He wore sleek suits, drove a fancy car, and spoke with polished words that barely resembled the little boy who used to fall asleep in Ruth's lap. Every time he visited, Ruth would light up. She'd cook his favorite dishes, crispy fried chicken, cheesy macaroni, and her famous sweet potato pie. They'd sit at her small kitchen table, and he'd talk about work, about the city, and about his plans for the future. Ruth would nod, eyes glistening with pride, her heart so full it felt like it could burst. One bright Saturday, Daniel arrived at Ruth's door with a surprise. He wasn't alone. A young woman stood beside him, stunning and poised. She wore a snow-white dress, glittering earrings, and perfume so strong it filled the small living room in seconds. Daniel's face beamed with excitement. "Mom," he said, taking the woman's hand, "this is Vanessa, my fiancée. We're getting married." Ruth's heart soared. A wedding. Her baby boy was finally settling down. Tears welled in her eyes as she hugged Daniel tightly. "Oh, my son. I'm so happy for you," she whispered, her voice cracking. Then she turned to Vanessa, arms open in welcome. "Come here, sweetheart. Welcome to the family." Vanessa hesitated. She gave Ruth a short, awkward hug, her body stiff. She didn't return the warmth. Instead, she glanced around the house with a raised brow, as though she'd never stepped foot in such a humble place. Ruth didn't notice. She was too overwhelmed with joy. She clapped her hands together and hurried to the kitchen. "Let me get some tea. I baked a cake this morning, too." They sat in the living room with mismatched cushions and Ruth's best porcelain cups. The conversation felt cheerful at first. Ruth asked questions about the wedding. "When is it? What colors are you using? I've saved my blue lace dress for a special day like this." She could already picture herself in the front row, her heart bursting with happiness as Daniel said his vows. Daniel leaned back in his seat, smiling. "It's going to be a huge wedding, Mom," he said. "Vanessa's family is very well connected. Her father knows senators, CEOs, real VIPs. We're planning something grand." Ruth clapped her hands together, thrilled. "Oh, that's wonderful, my son. I can't wait to meet her parents." Vanessa took a slow sip of tea, her long, painted nails tapping lightly against the china cup. Her eyes traveled over Ruth's dress, an old cotton gown with a faded print, then to Ruth's hands, darkened from years of scrubbing floors. Her gaze finally rested on Ruth's lined, smiling face. There was something in Vanessa's expression Ruth couldn't quite name. Coldness. Judgment. The warmth in the room began to fade. Daniel cleared his throat and glanced nervously at Vanessa, then back at his mother. His fingers fidgeted with the keys on the table. "Mom," he started slowly, We need to talk to you about something important. Ruth tilted her head. Of course, my son. Is it about the wedding? What is it? Daniel looked down, then up again, hesitating. Well, we've been thinking. We just want the day to be perfect. Ruth smiled gently. Of course it will be. It's your wedding day. He didn't smile back. Instead, Vanessa reached over and placed a hand on his arm, giving him a slight nod. It was clear she wanted him to say it. Vanessa's voice broke the silence. We mean no disrespect, ma'am, she said coolly, but this wedding is a high-profile event. A lot of influential people will be there. Media, family, friends, diplomats. Appearances matter in our world. Ruth blinked. She looked at Vanessa, then at her son, confused. What are you trying to say? Daniel finally looked her in the eyes. But it wasn't pride Ruth saw, it was shame. Shame directed not at himself, but at her. Mom, he said, voice low. We don't want you to attend the wedding. Time stopped. Ruth stared at him, unable to speak. What did you say, Daniel? She asked quietly. You don't want me there? At your wedding? Daniel shifted uncomfortably. Please, Mom. Don't make this harder than it is. You wouldn't fit in. People might say things. Look at your hands, your face. My face. Ruth whispered. Her voice trembled. You look so tired, Daniel continued. It's not personal. It's just for the sake of the event. We want everything perfect. Vanessa added, her voice cold and crisp. We're not trying to hurt you, but your presence would be out of place. The words pierced Ruth like shards of glass. Out of place. Embarrassment. She looked down at the hands that had held her son through sickness, through school, through fire. The hands that had fed him, clothed him, built his future. She raised her head again, and for the first time, she didn't recognize the man sitting across from her. He wore an expensive watch, designer shoes, but the boy she had loved, the one who used to hold her finger while crossing the street, was gone. She stood slowly, steady. Okay, she said simply. Her voice was flat. Okay, Daniel. Daniel let out a breath of relief. Thanks for understanding, Mom. We'll send you pictures. Ruth didn't reply. She watched them leave. They didn't finish the cake. They didn't drink the tea. And they didn't look back. The front door clicked shut, leaving behind a silence, so heavy it pressed on Ruth's chest. She stood there, frozen, in the middle of the room. The cake sat untouched. The tea had gone cold. She walked slowly to the mirror hanging above the bookshelf. Her reflection stared back. The lines around her mouth, the tired eyes, the scar near her left eye. She reached up and traced it gently with her fingertip. That scar had a story. A fire, thick smoke, a frightened little boy in her arms. The memory flashed so vividly she could still hear the crackling flames and feel the heat biting at her skin. She had saved Daniel's life that night. He was 5 years old, sound asleep when the fire broke out in their old apartment. She had carried him through smoke and fire, shielding his tiny body with hers. A burning beam had fallen and scorched her face. That scar, the one he now found so unpleasant, was a symbol of her love. Ruth turned away from the mirror. Her eyes were dry. She didn't need to cry anymore. A calm, quiet decision settled over her heart. Her son had chosen his world. Now, she would choose hers. The next morning, Ruth rose early just like she always had. But instead of putting on her cleaning uniform, she pulled out a navy blue dress from her wardrobe, the one she wore to church on special Sundays. She put on a string of pearls her late husband had given her and slipped her feet into her good shoes. She looked in the mirror again. This time, she saw strength. She saw a woman who had been through storms and survived them all. A mother. A fighter. She picked up her handbag and walked out of the house without looking back. Ruth's first stop was the downtown bank. The floors were marble, echoing under her careful steps. She didn't join the regular queue. Instead, she went straight to the office of Mr. Harold, the bank manager. A kind, elderly man. He had known Ruth for more than 2 decades. Ruth, he said with surprise. Good morning. Everything all right? Ruth gave a polite smile. Everything's fine. I just need to make some changes to my accounts. Mr. Harold motioned for her to sit. Of course, of course. Let me pull up your file. Mr. Harold adjusted his glasses as he scrolled through her account. What can I do for you today? Ruth folded her hands on her lap. There's a joint savings account under my name and my son's, Daniel. I want to close it. Transfer every naira into a new account, under my name only. Mr. Harold looked up, surprised. That account has quite a bit saved. You called it Daniel's Future, remember? Are you sure? Ruth nodded. I'm sure.
My son is doing well now.
He doesn't need my help anymore. Mr. Harold hesitated. I should let you know, Daniel has a credit card linked to your main account. He's been using it quite frequently. Ruth's expression didn't change. I know. I see the statements. Cancel the card today. Immediately. Mr. Harold sighed. He spent a lot last week. A dinner at Eclipse Lounge. A new designer watch before that. Ruth nodded slowly. That will be the last he ever buys on my account.
Her voice was calm.
Also, I'm a co-signer on the lease for his apartment. The rent is auto-deducted. I want that stopped. Mr. Harold leaned back in his chair, searching Ruth's face. He could see the weariness beneath her poise, the ache in her eyes that even her pearl necklace couldn't hide. He had watched her come into this bank for years, sometimes tired from scrubbing floors, sometimes short on breath, but never short on dignity. Every deposit she made was soaked in sacrifice. I won't ask questions, he said softly. I'll take care of everything. Ruth gave a quiet nod. Thank you, Harold. She stood, picked up her bag, and walked out, leaving behind the chapter of her life she had once built for her son. The sun was warm on Ruth's shoulders as she walked down the street. Her next stop was a small law office nestled between a pharmacy and a bakery. The sign above read, James and Associates. Mr. James had been her lawyer for years. He looked up in surprise as she entered. Ruth, what a pleasant surprise. Please come in. She sat down in the leather chair across from his desk. Mr. James, I need to change my will. He nodded. Of course. Let me pull it up. Right now, everything goes to your son, your house, your savings, insurance. That's what I want to change, Ruth interrupted gently. I want to remove my son, Daniel, from the will. Completely. He will receive nothing. Not the house, not a coin. Mr. James looked up sharply. Ruth, are you sure about this? What happened? Ruth looked down at her hands, resting on her lap. He said I was too ugly to attend his wedding. That I'd embarrass him. My hands, my face, ashamed of the very things that gave him life. Mr. James fell silent. Ruth hadn't shared the full story with anyone until now. But today, she wanted it all known. She told Mr. James everything, how Daniel had brought Vanessa, how they both smiled while saying cruel things. He forgot how I got this scar, she said, touching the faint mark near her eye.
He was 5.
There was a fire. I carried him out through smoke and flames. A beam fell and burned my face. I shielded him with my body. Her voice wavered, but she held steady. This face he finds so offensive, it saved his life. These hands he now rejects fed him, dressed him, and lifted him out of poverty. And he erased it all for a pretty picture. Mr. James was quiet for a long moment. Then he took off his glasses and wiped his eyes with a handkerchief. Ruth, he said, his voice husky, you are one of the bravest, most selfless women I have ever known. Ruth gave a soft smile. Thank you. But I'm not doing this to hurt him. I'm doing this because I finally see things clearly. Mr. James nodded solemnly and picked up his pen. What would you like done with your estate? Ruth didn't hesitate. I want everything left to St. Agnes Children's Foundation. All of it. Let it help children who truly need love. Let it help mothers who still believe their sacrifices matter. Once the documents were signed, Ruth stepped outside. The sun was now high in the sky, but her mind felt lighter than it had in years. Her feet carried her through the familiar streets of her city, not rushed, not burdened. She walked like a woman who had just been unchained. For so long, her life had revolved around Daniel, his school, his dreams, his future. Now, she felt like she had stepped out of a story where she was only a background character and into one where she could finally be the author of her own piece. 3 days later, the wedding day arrived. Ruth did not stay at home and weep. She did not wait by the phone for photos that would never come. Instead, she got up early, dressed in her navy blue church dress, and tied her scarf just right. She sat in her usual pew, hands folded in prayer.
She did not ask God to change the past.
She did not even ask him to fix what had broken. She simply prayed for strength, for herself, and for the little boy she once carried through fire. After the service, Ruth volunteered in the church kitchen. She served food to the hungry and washed dishes beside younger women who marveled at her calm smile. Her rough hands moved with grace and purpose. That afternoon, as she stirred a pot of rice and beans, the only thing she allowed herself to feel was gratitude. Not for what had happened, but for what had not broken her. The ache in her chest was still there, but it no longer ruled her. She was not a discarded mother. She was a survivor. Meanwhile, in another part of the city, Daniel stood at the altar in a custom-made tuxedo, a dazzling smile on his face. Vanessa, radiant in her jeweled gown, walked down the aisle with cameras flashing and soft music playing. The guests whispered compliments about how perfect everything looked. The chairs were white and gold. The flowers were imported. Every detail had been curated for elegance. Daniel didn't spare a thought for the empty seat where his mother should have been. He didn't even notice it. The reception was lavish. Waiters carried trays of champagne. Guests dined on lobster, beef Wellington, and gourmet desserts. Daniel toasted to love, to success, to new beginnings. His friends cheered. Vanessa's parents looked proud. Everything was flawless. And yet, as Daniel danced under the crystal chandeliers, there was a flicker in the back of his mind. Like a light trying to go out. It was the faintest thought of Ruth's hands, the warmth of her home, the sweet potato pie she used to make. But he pushed it away with another gulp of champagne. The honeymoon was even more extravagant. Vanessa had chosen a private island resort where the sand was white like sugar and the ocean shimmered like liquid glass. They dined on rooftops and bathed in rose petals. Daniel felt like royalty. Every morning he woke to a view of the sea and a beautiful woman by his side. Every night he fell asleep in luxury. Ruth was a world away, distant, silent, erased. In those 7 days, Daniel truly believed he had everything a man could want. On their final night, they had a grand dinner at the resort's most exclusive restaurant. It was a 7-course feast of delicacies neither of them could pronounce. Vanessa looked stunning in a silver gown, her diamond earrings catching the candlelight. Daniel felt invincible. When the bill came, he didn't glance at the total. With a grin, he pulled out his glossy black credit card, the one tied to the account his mother had always funded, and handed it to the waiter. "Put it all on this," he said confidently. The waiter returned after a few minutes, looking apologetic. "I'm sorry, sir. This card has been declined." Daniel blinked, confused. "That's not possible. Try again." The waiter nodded and left. Vanessa frowned. "What's going on?" Daniel laughed awkwardly. "Probably just a glitch." But after the third attempt, the waiter returned. "Sir, the card is not active. Do you have another form of payment?" Daniel's confidence faltered. He took out his personal card, a card he rarely used because it wasn't backed by his mother's solid account. As they walked back to their suite, Vanessa was quiet. Her heels clicked sharply against the marble tiles. "Why didn't you know your card was canceled?" she asked. "You said your mother always handled that stuff." Daniel's smile faltered. "She probably forgot to tell me. I'll fix it when we get back." But a feeling was growing inside him. A strange, uneasy feeling. He hadn't spoken to Ruth since the wedding. He hadn't even texted. And now something didn't feel right. But instead of calling her, he poured another glass of wine and told himself everything would be fine. Daniel returned to the bank the next morning, irritation written all over his face. He waited in the manager's office, tapping his foot. Mr. Harold entered calmly, holding a folder. "Daniel," he said with a professional smile. "Good to see you. What can I help you with?" "My card," Daniel said, voice tight. "It stopped working during my honeymoon. I need it reactivated." There must be a mistake. Mr. Harold didn't respond immediately. He sat down and opened the folder. There's no mistake. Your mother requested all your link services be terminated. The credit card, the rent payments, everything. Daniel's face paled. She did what? She closed the joint account and opened a new one in her name only. She asked for the lease payments to be canceled and the credit card closed. Mr. Harold folded his hands. She said you were doing well on your own and no longer needed her support. Daniel laughed bitterly. This is ridiculous. She can't just cut me off like that. Mr. Harold looked at him steadily. She can, Daniel. And she did. Daniel's chest tightened. For the first time, he realized something. His mother wasn't just upset, she was done. By the time Daniel got back to the apartment, Vanessa was already aware. A notice had arrived about the unpaid rent. What the hell is this? She demanded, waving the letter in his face. I thought you said your mom was covering this place for now. Daniel rubbed his temples.
She was.
But something's changed. Vanessa crossed her arms. Well, change it back. We have bills to pay, Daniel. Do you know how embarrassing it is to be flagged at checkout because your card got declined? I'm handling it, he snapped. But deep down, he wasn't sure he could. He tried calling Ruth, but she didn't answer. He left a message. Then 2. Then 5. Mom, I don't know what's going on, but please call me back. I'm sorry, okay? Just please call. He sat on the couch in silence, staring at his phone. No reply. No message. Nothing. Vanessa was in the bedroom, slamming drawers. You better figure this out, Daniel, she muttered. I didn't marry into struggle. Those words stung more than he expected. He turned off his phone and stared at the ceiling, the quiet beginning to sound like punishment. The days turned into weeks. Daniel tried to manage with his salary alone, but the rent, car, clothes, and dinners were all too much. He had built a lifestyle funded by Ruth's sacrifices, and now that she was gone from it, everything began to collapse. Vanessa became colder. You lied to me, she said one night. You told me we'd have security. Stability. Your mother spoiled you, and now I have to deal with the consequences. Daniel didn't argue. He didn't even have the energy. Deep down, he knew she was right. One evening, as he walked home from work, he passed by a bus stop. A group of women stood there chatting, and for a second, he thought he saw Ruth, wearing her navy blue dress and pearl necklace. His heart leapt. Mom, he called. But when the woman turned, it wasn't her. Just someone with the same grace in her posture. He stood still, his chest aching in a way he hadn't felt since he was a child. He realized he didn't know where she lived anymore. Didn't even know if she was okay. She had vanished from his life like smoke. Eventually, Vanessa left. There was no big fight, no final blowout. She simply packed her bags and left a note on the counter. I didn't sign up for this. I hope you find what you're looking for. Daniel stood there staring at the paper for a long time, unable to move. His phone was silent. His apartment was cold. The city outside no longer felt like a place of dreams. It felt empty. He tried one more time to call his mother. The line rang and rang. Then, the number you are trying to reach is not available. Daniel visited the church Ruth used to attend. A kind usher recognized him and gave a soft smile. She still comes, you know. Every Sunday, same seat. Do you know where she lives? He asked. The usher shook her head. She moved away a few months ago. Said she needed a fresh start. But she still volunteers here sometimes. Daniel nodded, grateful and broken. He sat in the last pew, staring at the altar, thinking about the hands that used to tie his shoelaces, the voice that once sang him to sleep. How had he become so blind? One afternoon, Daniel returned to the bank, not to demand answers, but to ask a favor. Mr. Harold welcomed him in quietly. I just want to know, is she okay? Daniel asked. Mr. Harold looked at him for a long moment. She's more than okay, he said. She's finally free. Daniel looked down at his lap. I didn't mean to hurt her. I just wanted to impress people. I didn't realize what I was losing until she was gone. Mr. Harold nodded slowly. Well, that's the thing about mothers like Ruth. They give everything, but they know when to stop. Daniel stepped outside the bank and looked up at the sky. The same sky that once stretched over his childhood, over Ruth's sacrifices, over all the days she had gone without food so he could eat. He remembered the scar on her face, the one she never spoke of. He remembered the soft sigh she gave when she watched him graduate. And for the first time in his adult life, Daniel wept.
Not out of shame,
But out of grief for the love he had buried under pride. And for the mother he might never find again. Months passed. Seasons changed. Daniel adjusted to a quieter, simpler life. He moved into a smaller apartment, sold his car, and learned to cook for himself, often failing but trying anyway. He had once believed success was measured in status, money, and sleek appearances. But now, he found success in small moments, like ironing his shirt properly or remembering how his mother folded towels with corners tucked in neatly. He missed her every day, but he didn't know how to reach her. She had disappeared like a shadow at sunset, silent, graceful, final. One rainy Saturday, Daniel found himself walking past a modest community center. He noticed a banner that read, "Soup Kitchen, Volunteers Needed." Something pulled at him. He stepped inside. The smell of food, the low hum of conversation, the sound of ladles hitting pots, it reminded him of childhood Sundays in his mother's kitchen. He signed up to help. And there, among the clatter of dishes and warm steam, he found something he hadn't felt in a long time: purpose. He came every weekend, not to search for Ruth, though he always looked, but to give, to serve, the way she had done for years without applause. One day, as he was stacking trays, an older woman in a white scarf walked past him. Her hands were familiar, not soft, but capable, worn, but steady. His breath caught. "Mom," he whispered. The woman turned. It wasn't her, but the sadness that followed wasn't disappointment. It was acceptance. He knew then, he might never see her again, but he would carry her legacy, whether she saw it or not. Across the city, Ruth sat at a quiet window in a small house surrounded by flowers she grew herself. She no longer waited for her phone to ring. Her days were filled with new joy, volunteering, gardening, reading, and mentoring young mothers in her church. Her heart had healed, not by forgetting her son, but by remembering herself. She no longer saw her life as a story about Daniel.
It was a story about love.
Deep, sacrificial love. And the courage it took to let go. Sometimes, she wondered what he was doing. If he had found peace. If he had learned.
But she didn't dwell on those thoughts.
Instead, she prayed, not that he would come back, but that he would grow into the man she had always believed he could become. The boy she had pulled from a burning room had grown into a man lost in another kind of fire, one made of pride, shame, and false expectations. She hoped he'd find a way out. At the children's hospital, where she now donated regularly, Ruth watched a young mother cradle her sick child. The woman's face was tired, her hands trembling. Ruth walked over quietly and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You're doing well," she said softly. "You're stronger than you know." The mother looked up, tears in her eyes, and nodded. Ruth understood. She had lived it. And now, she could pass on what had once been nearly torn from her: dignity, worth, and the power of choosing peace. Daniel's life eventually found rhythm again. He moved into a modest neighborhood, far from the glittering world he had once chased. His co-workers now called him dependable. He taught a few kids in the local youth center how to tie ties for their first job interviews. He began to write letters to Ruth, even though he didn't know where to send them. He kept them in a box, each one beginning the same way: "Dear Mom, I was wrong." He wrote about his regret, about the wedding, about the words he never should have said. He described the moment he realized that the most beautiful hands he had ever known were the ones he had once called too rough. He wrote about the scar on her cheek and how he finally remembered the story behind it: the fire, the rescue, the pain she bore for him. Every letter ended with, "I hope one day you'll forgive me. But even if you don't, I will love you until the day I die." Ruth never saw those letters. But one spring afternoon, she passed by a park and saw a group of boys playing basketball. On the bench sat a young man helping another lace up a pair of shoes. His words were gentle. His smile, soft, unsure, familiar. For a second, Ruth paused. Her heart skipped. But she didn't move closer. She watched for a while, then walked on. She didn't need confirmation. Whether he saw her or not didn't matter. Her prayer had been answered. Daniel had remembered how to be a man she could be proud of. The world never knew the full story. But somewhere, in two separate corners of the city, a mother and son lived quietly, changed, scarred, but stronger. Ruth kept her garden blooming. Daniel kept his promises. And in that silent, invisible thread between them, there was something unbreakable. Not perfect, not loud, but real. The kind of love that survives fire, time, and even distance. And though the words, "I'm sorry," never reached her ears, Ruth smiled often now, because sometimes forgiveness is not about hearing the apology. It's about seeing the change.